What's poppin', players? Welcome back to the Two Penny Gamescast, episode 252. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my good friend and co-host. Say hello to the people, Connor Elliott.
Hello. You'll find this amusing. I saw on the radio, I listened on the radio, The Real Slim Shady by Eminem. And I was like, that's weird. I usually don't hear that on the radio. Changed to the next radio channel, and it was playing again on a different setting, on a different channel. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. You, my friend, have stumbled upon. You, my friend, have stumbled upon why Eminem was and is as popular as he is, and that's because he played on every radio station. You found him in the late '90s and early 2000s. Rap artists would play on hip hop stations. Rock and roll artists would play on rock and roll stations. And black and white stations, respectively, and Eminem played on both.
It had nothing to do with his skin color, of course.
No, of course not. Nothing to do with his skin color. Why would it ever have anything to do with his skin color? But of course, ladies and gentlemen, we are not here to talk hip hop, unfortunately, and we are also here to talk about video games. My name is Tavin Bothel. I am here. I am one of your hosts. Please like, subscribe. We do this all the time, so make sure you check in and tap in to the channel to help us succeed. Of course, this is the Two Penny Gamescast. Each week, me and Connor come to you with the nerdy news you need to know concerning the video game industry. Each come to us. I'm sorry, I'm doing two different things at once, so it's hard to do it all at once.
Whereas I'm doing nothing.
Right. Concerning the video game industry, we each come to you with two topics, two pennies, if you will, and we give you our 2 cents on them. Now, that's not what's happening this week. Connor, why?
Well, audio is tricky. And sometimes someone's muted and you don't know they're muted until after we do things.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened this last Monday.
That is exactly what happened this last Monday. Of course, we record all of our podcasts live, twitch.tv/TwoPennyGames, Monday afternoons. The piggy bank went by flawlessly. You'll get that Saturday, 8 a.m. as always. The Gamescast, I fucked up. It was my fault. I messed up. So, of course, Connor here writes every story that we read on the show. So you can see this week's work over at TwoPennyGamesNews.substack.com. Link is in the description down below, along with time codes if you want to jump to any specific discussion topic you see in this episode. But this episode is not going to be focused on the news. Rather, we're going to go ahead and we're going to give our The Last of Us Season 2 HBO review this week as a sort of make good for the week because we messed up and all of that good conversation is gone. But, of course, this is the Two Penny Gamescast where we give you our 2 pennies, our 2 cents. And, of course, we want to have the audience have their opportunity to put in their 2 cents. And I'm going to do that right now. Sorry, I'm dealing with a lot because everything got messed up as soon as I pressed record.
It's not like we care about these user comments. We just have to do it to pad out time.
We care. We care. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you drop a comment down below so that you can get your comments read on the show, much like WTB1327, who commented on our Bungie Steals artwork video. Quote, Bungie was a legendary studio till all of the legends left the past 10 years. I imagine he meant to say they all left in the past 10 years is what they meant to say there. That doesn't make them any less of a legendary studio. Like just
the
because
work persists.
Some of the big names have left. Yes, that's true. That happens with every studio, but just because Bungie isn't what Bungie was 10 years ago doesn't mean that they're still not Bungie. Same with BioWare, same with Naughty Dog, same with a lot of these big studios that were founded on a couple of names and kept going. And I'll remind you, WTB, Bungie still does good work. Destiny 2 is a great game, and just last year released one of their best expansions to date. So yeah, I don't know about calling them a former legendary studio. I still think they're up there. Now, Marathon does appear to be a miss, and it is unfortunate that they're tied up with all of the art stealing stuff. That's really unfortunate. And it's extra unfortunate that it keeps happening to Bungie, like we talked about in the video. But Bungie is still Bungie. Don't get it twisted.
the studios you listed were to die at some point in the future, when people look back on it, they're more or less going to not think of the years where they eventually had their downfall. They would think of, oh, they made Halo. Oh, they made Uncharted. They made what was the other one? They made Mass Effect, Dragon Age when it was good. So those are the things that are going to stick in people's mind as time progresses onwards. But I mean, it does suck that these studios that were like definitively always putting out good stuff are now hit or miss. Maybe less with Bungie, and I wouldn't say with Naughty Dog, but there's tons of other ones out there that definitely fill that space. But then look at something like Capcom. They had a space where you could have said that yeah, of course they made Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, and you could have said, oh, well, 2010s, 2015s, they are, their best days are gone. They're not the best anymore, or even that good anymore. They're no longer legendary. Look what they did now. They made a comeback. They're arguably in the best position they've ever been in, whereas a lot of other game companies are having tons of problems financially. We would talk about it. You can go read the story on the on the website, but and this is a little bit old news, week old. They had hit their 8th consecutive year of high earning sales. Like, they keep getting more and more money, with Monster Hunter Wilds as going even further. So give Bungie some support, Yeah, they've hit in a rough patch, but hopefully in the future they'll be able to maybe hammer out Marathon or go on to another project that, isn't another Destiny. Because I kind of understand someone saying, well, you've just made Destiny since you've moved off of Halo.
What have you done for me? What have you done for me lately?
Exactly, and especially because Destiny's a multiplayer game. Maybe you're not a big multiplayer fan. But still, I agree with you, Tavin. Just the legendary status, I think, remains, even if they're not as legendary as they once were.
And even if a studio evolves and turns into something else or gets focused onto something else, like, if they're still putting out great work, they're still great. It's just it may not be for you, and that's unfortunate because we all want every game to be for us, but sometimes they're not, and that kind of sucks. But great example pulling in Capcom there.
Yeah.
And then our final comment of the day for our second penny from the audience. On the I want more video game remakes from the Penny Drop video essay that I dropped last week, 2 weeks ago now. Please go watch that video. It's fantastic. Supreme Leader Francisco, let me do that again. Supreme Leader Francisco 9062 says 90% of remakes don't provide a way for modern gamers to fall in love with classic titles, especially not the Resident Evil remakes. LOL, games are an interactive medium. That's what makes them special. If you completely change how they play, it's not the same game. You haven't played 2 or 3. You played a homogenized third-person shooter with an RE texture pack.
I think this guy doesn't like these games.
I don't think he likes these games, man. I disagree, and I say so in the video. It's not about replacing the original game. That's not the purpose of a remake. The purpose of the remake is to open the door and allow someone to become a fan of a franchise that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And because they're already a fan, that allows them to jump back to those older titles and give them a better chance than they would have if they were just going in blind. That happened with me with Resident Evil. That's my personal Resident Evil experience. I liked Resident Evil games, but I'd only played 5 through 7 growing up, right? 2 of those aren't exactly the highest, rated games in the franchise, specifically 6, right?
And 7, of course.
No, 7's great. Stop it. You just don't want to admit that, despite our love for 5, it's not the best game in the world. All of that said, when Resident Evil 2 Remake came out, it turned me into a full-blown fan. And since then, I have been open and willing to playing the older titles, which before, you probably would not have caught me dead doing. And now, I'd love to play those. We played the Resident Evil HD remake from the GameCube for the Game Club a couple of years ago now at this point, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. So even that, which is updated and does play better than the original game and has more content and stuff, even that style of game, I don't know if I would have gotten through without becoming a fan first. Let people have a way in, and then they can expand, explore, and enjoy everything later.
An even more salient point is bringing up Final Fantasy VII, because admittedly, when you go back and play the old Resident Evil games, it's not the original 2 and the original 3, which maybe this guy's in the mindset of being a big fan of, and he didn't like the remakes replacing them, quote unquote. I know that's not your argument, and I don't think that's a proper one to make, But with Final Fantasy VII, there's a very big gap in between where the remake is versus where the original one is. The original one has a lot of outdated problems, and yet after the fact, you played it and you like it more than remake. It's you can enjoy old games, and it really just helps if you play the remake. Maybe it didn't work out for you, but it does for tons of other people, I think. But everyone has their own tastes.
Yeah, so respect Supreme Leader, but hard disagree. But respect. Connor, let's go ahead and jump into our main topic of the day. Let's talk about HBO's The Last of Us Season 2. Now, some quick background information. We did watch and review Season 1. Connor and I have played both games. Connor's a big fan of the first game. I'm a big fan of both games. Connor didn't, hate the second game, but Connor, it's just not, it didn't do what the first game did for you, correct?
Yes, and we did do a review. Did we do a review on part 2? I believe we did, right?
No, we did a spoiler cast in our first ever episode, which I don't recommend going back and watching. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not a good production.
And in this review, I'll be going over some of my issues with Last of Us Part 2, comparing it to the TV show. And we're probably also going to talk about the first part of The Last of Us. So, of course, this is going to be, it's going to be full of spoilers. Full of spoilers.
We're not going spoiler filled here today. We are recording on a Thursday. The final episode has been out for 4 or 5 days at this point. It's, you can come back and watch this whenever you want. But I do want to have a full conversation of what's happened, where are we going, and where could we potentially go, and why that could or couldn't work. I want to have the full conversation here. So if you want to dip out now, finish up your season 2, please do so. But if you don't, or rather, if you want to know our opinions first, I would say season 2 is pretty good. It's not as good as season 1, and I would still recommend you watch it. But I liked season 1 more, and in my season 1 review, I stated that I felt that season 1 and the first game were pretty neck and neck. I think I still prefer the first game over the TV show, but they weren't there wasn't a gap in quality between the two. So whichever one you wanted to enjoy was a fine way into the franchise. I don't feel that way with this. I feel definitively the game is better than the show when it comes to season 2. But season 2, I still had a really good time watching. Connor?
Flip that. At the time when we did the Last of Us Part 1 review, I probably said something akin to what you were saying. Yeah, they're pretty neck and neck and equal. I've kind of thinking about it again, especially after watching the second season, because in that same vein, I think it exceeded the video game, the Part 2 video game. And going back again, before I go into that, the first one, there's some issues I have when I look back on it, but it is still relatively neck and neck. I just still think, like you, I put the first one above it. But there's some issues that it had, particularly I found, even though the Bob episode was better than what happened with Bob in the video game, I can't. One of the things that stuck out. Who? Phil?
Bill. His
Bill.
name's Bill.
Fuck Bob. Phil. Yeah. But one thing that stuck out to me that I keep going back to when I think of Part 1 is that really. I'm not the guy that usually says this, but almost that misogynistic scene with Tess where she dies, and it's this really weird segment where she dies to infected, but rather than killing her in literally every single other way we've seen them kill people, it goes up to kiss her, and she's paralyzed with fear, and little feelers come out of its mouth and go into hers before she blows herself up. It was incredibly strange and a lot less, cut and dry in a good way. With what the first game did, where she just unceremoniously off-screen killed by raiders defending you. It just turns into this unnecessarily creepy scene that I just still think to myself today, why'd they do that? Because I thought maybe they would build on it somehow in Part 2, and I guess they kind of did with one of the special infected, but they don't even act that way in this season. So I just always think of that. Yeah, it's very, very weird. The other point, and this is more of a contentious one, the Sam and Henry storyline I think was inferior for two reasons. First of all, I feel like the setting, because it takes a very hard drift away from what the video game does, and I think it does better because you are just like them, two survivors that are caught up in a setting that is talked about, but it's the first time you really see it work in a, I guess structured way, which is raiders. You have this whole raider civilization that's popped up, and they do what Joel did, or at least what it infers Joel did, which is, surprise people, rob them, kill them, and then do it over and over and over again. And, when you're going through the game, you see them commit pretty brutal acts of violence against people that are clearly just trying to get away. And it sets itself in the world of this is how far humanity has fallen, to where people in the name of survival are committing such, depraved acts, and they don't seem to have any issue with it whatsoever. And I think turning that into this ideological kind of like anti-government movement that popped up, and there's some retaliation that's being put upon against Sam and Henry because of their role in that authoritarian government.
I liked all of this. All of that was dope.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I'm just like, none of that had any impact whatsoever. It was very dramatized. None of the even though it was very nuanced, I forgot about a lot of it. The one character was the sister of the guy who was like clearly the person who was leading the revolution, probably in a more positive way.
Yeah.
And she goes the left turn.
Didn't like
that
her.
Was interesting. You didn't like her? That was like when I think about it, I'm like, well, that's the only thing I really cared about.
Her arc was the worst part of that season. But Connor, we're diving in deep into season one.
We are. But I'm sorry. Going forward with part 2, the reason why I very much liked it, of course. And it's kind of enforced in my mind that when they were making part 2, the video game, they were more interested in making a TV show than a video game. Because my original issue with it was...
I don't know how you can say these things.
I say this because the gameplay gets very repetitive after a very certain point. And not to mention the narrative of Last of Us Part 2, which is very reliant on characters, is just almost non-existent aside from Ellie and Joel's past relationship and her dealing with that grief. And even in that case, the grief is shown better here in this video game. We talked about it before, where when...
You're literally saying everything opposite of what I'm about to say.
I know. This is why I knew this was going to happen. I think mostly about Ellie and Dina's relationship, which especially due to Dina's actress, who kicks it out of the park in this season.
I do agree with that.
It feels like a lot more of a, I wouldn't say relatable because I'm not a lesbian, but a more empathetic, loving relationship that you care a lot more about.
Relate without being exactly the same. That's
in the same
relatability has nothing to do with like the specific context of what you're watching.
It does with it very much clearly matters that they're lesbians. It doesn't do it that much, but it clearly shows their relationship. It matters to their
characters, but you can understand being in a relationship.
I get that. That's why I'm saying,
or just caring for somebody.
And that's why I'm saying when it actually shows that a lot more thoroughly than the video game does, and it doesn't get hung up with the same problems where a lot of that is hindered by her issues with Joel dying. And they do it, I think, a lot more realistically in this one, where because a lot of how grief works, especially when you're around somebody that you care about, that you're, whether it's a friend or a lover or a parent, that sadness is more likely to go away. And you don't feel it. It's in those moments when you're alone and no longer with somebody else that you start to get sad again. And it shows this in 3 particular scenes. One of which, when she's in that auditorium in the theater and she looks around and you kind of, at least in those moments, and I'll list the 3 moments: the auditorium, the scene in the bookstore, and the scene in the guitar store, record store. And based off what happens in the first game and in the first season of the show, you can imagine her with Joel, experiencing that with Joel, which was, of course, the key thing of them going across country and experiencing new things together and developing their relationship. And you get in those moments of silence and solitary that the feeling of Joel's loss weighs heavy on her the most. It's not when it doesn't hinder the actual relationship and the dynamic between Dina and Ellie, versus the game does, and instead opts for when she's alone. And again, going back to the game, my issue is that they throw out the traditional way that the first Last of Us played, where you're not usually alone. You have somebody with you to bounce off of and have some kind of, camaraderie connection with, and instead opts for you to do, gameplay segment after gameplay segment that gets repetitive after a certain point. And for the most part,
in some moments, there's plenty of moments where you're still riding with somebody.
No, yeah, but then they drop off very quickly, and most of the time you're less with somebody than you are with somebody. And even in those moments in the game, it feels like you're just going through gameplay segment after gameplay segment, which again, a lot of them get kind of samey. And you don't have that effect of Joel being gone unless you read like the poetry in her book, which, I guess it's a good way for her to, express her feelings, but I didn't give a shit. It's far more effective, these moments that the show provides, where it's, you wish you were there with somebody. And they kind of hammer that home with the scene in the museum as well, where when she's spending time with him, that of course contrasts with those moments she's not with him, experiencing things they would have something to say about and talk with. And when Dina's not there, it's felt. When she is there, it's them riffing off each other and, having a relationship. But the fact that the Joel's death is more exhibited and present in the show than I think it is with the video game.
Yeah, I disagree. The one thing that I will agree with, and again, I liked this season, but I didn't love this season, and I wanted to love it. But I still liked it, and I'm still excited for season 3, but we're going to get into some issues that I have structurally. Well, here, let me start with the positive. The performances in this show across the board are phenomenal. There's not a weak link in this show. All of them are awesome. From Ellie to Dina to Joel, all the way down to like Isaac and some of the like smaller Seraphite characters that we meet and then are quickly usually dispatched of. All of the performances are phenomenal. This is a masterclass in acting across the board. Everybody does great. Isabella Merced, I think, actually supersedes what the actor in the game did. No disrespect, I loved Dina in the game as well, but I think Isabella Merced kills it here. There's just something that you get from live action that you can't get in animation. There's just a little bit more soul. There's just a little bit more person. I'm not saying, like, you can get close in animation. You can still feel things in animation. Animation can still, like, make you cry and make you feel all these things or whatever. But there's just a little bit more person in live action that you just can't get. I think it's the thinking. You can see a person think, and you can track their thoughts. It's a little harder to do that with animation because usually there's more hands in the pot. So, like, it's not always 100% clear what the character is thinking in that moment. And also, like, animation fidelity is so much harder to capture than just a human face that has so much more animation to it, a real life human face. So, you talk about the scene in the music store where they play the Aha song, Take On Me. I love that scene in the game. It's probably one of my most favorites. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in that game, if not my favorite scene in that game. And I liked it more here because you can watch Isabella Merced fall in love with Ellie in this scene. Now, that is because they did structurally kind of change when their relationship begins in this show versus the game, where it begins pretty early on in the runtime. So, there's a little bit of a apples to oranges comparison in that sense, but that Isabella Merced's acting in that scene, she doesn't have any dialogue, and she fucking kills it. She's so good. Bella Ramsey is also excellent in this show, despite I do have some issues with the dialogue writing in this show. I think all of the situation writing works. I think it functions fine, or functions very well. I have issues with some of the dialogue writing. It's just generally not as sharp. It's just generally not as clever or even interesting as it was in season 1. I think a large part of that is due to Craig Mazin's heavier involvement this season than last season, where he sort of co-opted writing with Neil Druckmann. And lo and behold, the best episode of the season is the one where Neil Druckmann and Haley Gross walked back into the room. I think they just understand these characters and understand how these characters talk and operate better than Craig Mazin does. No disrespect to Craig, clearly still a talented writer, but there are times where I'm like, our tone is off. We don't have that tone right. I disagree with you, Connor. I don't feel Ellie's grief as much in this season as I did in the game.
No. So I agree with that. I think it's depicted more realistically and in a way that doesn't hinder character relationships and development.
I can agree with that because I don't think Ellie needs to be depressed all the time. I think that is actually a knock against the game, is that Ellie's just kind of sad all the time, and so she's not as fun to be around. So I do like that they added some light back into Ellie's character for this show, and I do recognize that show Ellie and game Ellie are now two distinct and different Ellies, and I'm fine with that. I respect that. I'm totally cool with that. It's just I don't the big problem for me is if revenge and the cycle of violence is such a big theme for this story, and I've said before, it's not the only theme that matters, but it's one of the bigger themes. I don't feel that from what they've established here in this first season. I don't feel like Ellie's on the warpath. I don't feel like she's taking a lot of revenge in this show outside of the Nora kill. But the Owen kill didn't really work for me. The Mel kill does make me dislike Ellie more in a good way. Like, it's supposed to make me dislike her more because it's not a self-defense kill. It's a manslaughter kill, but that also takes, like, her intention was not to murder the pregnant woman. Her intention in the game was to murder the pregnant woman, despite her not knowing it was a pregnant woman, you know? So, like, it's a little bit of, like, you know, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other with all that. And I kind of feel that across the board with this season, where, like, I enjoy that we have Ellie's personality still shining through and is not overridden with grief. But at the same time, I don't feel like I feel like we lose the point of why we're
of
here.
The revenge.
Yeah.
So
or even I feel like the characters sometimes forget why they're there.
I'm going to channel the criticisms of people who criticize Last of Us Part 2 and the kind of criticism you hate, which is that in the course of the game, because we know what's going to happen. We have the ability of foresight to know that Ellie, spoiler, is not going to take her revenge. For good reasons. A lot of people say, oh, it's stupid because she killed a bunch of people on the way there. It's stupid because why wouldn't you do it while you're here? You know, those people clearly just didn't get the point of what changed after, you know, she meets Abby for the final time. But in that same, you know, unreasonable criticism, the fact that you don't have her just mowing down a bunch of people every single chance she gets, and in fact, you still see a lot of her morality, where she sees a group of people split guys' stomachs open and, you know, hang them from the rafters, and she still is, you know, sympathetic and wants to save one of these same exact people because they're in a situation where they're the victim, and she doesn't like that, and just her humanity is a part of it. But at the same exact time, she casts it aside and, you know, has that scene, of course, with Nora, and the ones you mentioned before with Owen and Mel. But when it comes to the cumulative story of revenge, I feel like it'll hit a lot harder when you don't have swaths and like an army of enemies that you massacred and mowed down just to get there to abandon it at the very end. I think
I don't think I needed a massacre, but I do think I needed more, and I just needed more focus. I needed Ellie to be more focused in this season, and I don't think she's focused.
Well, you say you don't want to massacre, but that's definitively what she does in the second game, in the video game.
Yes,
and they have to do that because
it's a video game.
And that's where my original criticism says, well, it seems like they more wanted to make a TV show rather than a video game, because that kind of, in the same way you criticized, rightfully so, how there's that scene in Yakuza 0. I don't kill people, Kiryu says, as he does a segment where he's shooting people and blowing them up in helicopters, killing them. And it kind of, you know, it doesn't defeat the point, in my mind at least, it does for you, of Kiryu's no-kill rule, because I see that as, you know, stupid gameplay stuff in a game that's, you know, has a lot of stupid things in it, but takes fun in it. But it doesn't have that element in this more dour, serious series, so the impact of killing a bunch of people, having no issue with it, except for the ones that are narratively happening, makes it to where, you know, the impact of Ellie's revenge story is lessened. Whereas in this one, she's not going out of her way to kill people.
That's not what I'm saying for Last of Us Part 2. Ellie's warpath matters in the game. Now, it's a game, so her kill count is high. I'm not saying her kill count needs to be close to 100 people in the show here, right? But what is her kill count?
Well, if that did, I'm saying exactly, but that's something, if they did do like 100 people, it would, like the game, be lessened when we know what comes later.
I agree.
It's more impactful to have those individual moments.
Can we do more than 4? Can we do 7, 8, 10 people maybe? You know, just enough to be like, ooh, this is a lot of people you're killing. Like, I understand in live action, in a TV show, each specific death carries more weight than it does in a video game, because human life is quickly discarded in video games. Like, that's just how gameplay and combat mechanics work in video games, right? But we are adapting for television. And in television, a human life is more sacred, just because it's a quote-unquote real person, right? So the fact that Ellie has killed, I think it's 4 people. Owen, Mel, Nora, and then the one dude she attacks in the radio station. Am I right in that? Did she kill that guy?
Yeah, the theater, you mean?
No, the radio station. I think that's it.
When the radio station happened?
The radio station happens in
in the game,
Seattle day one. No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm talking the show because they come in and they see the scars have been hanging wolves up and gutting them and so forth, and then they
that's
sneak
what I was
upstairs.
talking. I didn't know that was a radio tower. Yeah. I didn't know that was a radio tower.
Station. Yeah.
Oh, okay, radio station.
And then there's that one dude who goes up and she ambushes him. He dies, right? That guy dies.
Oh yeah, she stabs him in the neck before they run away. Run away.
Great. I think that's it. Now, granted, 4 people is a lot of people in real life, but this is a world in which it's kill or be killed. So I need more than 4 people.
Well, to go back to Mel and Owen's death, particularly Mel's death, who again because a lot of things were said. The dialogue, for the most part, yes, is better in the video game. It's wittier and snappier. I don't know if necessarily if it's Craig Mazin, but it's easy to attribute that to him. But those characters are as characters are just better. Mel, it injects not this whiny person who has no character other than being whiny and a person
you don't know that yet.
Cheated on by Owen. Well, we don't know that, but I think we kind of get more of an indication of who she is with the scene where Joel dies, which before I go into that, like you say with the dialogue, is better in the game, where Abby comes to take her revenge. Joel takes the wind out of her sails and says, just get on with it. And then she says, you don't get to rush this. They do this in the show, but it's predated by this, long monologue that if you're watching that for the first time before you know Abby as a character is kind of stupid. Because in the game, it slowly unveils to you, oh, this is why is she doing this? You don't give it right out the gate. She doesn't tell you, you killed my father and this is why I am killing you, so and so and so forth. You find that out through the course of the game. And it far more and I get you might say this is because it's television, but it more just talks to you in segments like that.
Wow. Don't agree.
And this is not in the show?
No, I don't agree. I love that monologue. That's one of the best parts of this season. I have no problem with them telling us what Abby's motivations are, because it doesn't matter to Ellie. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter to Dina in that moment. It's only when it is revealed. They understand why Abby does what she does, but Dina specifically doesn't understand the severity of why Joel's sin was so bad, right? It's not until the end of the season where Ellie reveals what Joel did in totality that, oh shit, no, Abby had every right to do that, right? Because Joel's sin is so much deeper than Abby's sin, right? It changes Dina's perspective on the context and the situation, which I like that. That choice I like. Because I did think it was interesting to add the little bit of Dina stuff of I think it's added. I don't remember it being in the game. But it might be. Of the bandit who comes in and kills her sister and her mom.
Yeah.
And so forth, and how she wanted
not in the game.
She wanted to take revenge. She does
mention
the mom's family, and the family's not around. So I think
isn't the
it
mom
may have
there?
been no.
The sister. She has someone there in the house that comes at some point, right? When they're after the Seattle part?
No.
I feel like there was somebody who showed
Tommy
stuff
comes.
in that.
Tommy comes.
No, I know Tommy goes, but I think there's a scene later where someone had come.
No.
Before.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe they're mentioned and I've just got my facts wrong, but it's
hard to remember.
There's not a physical person who comes to the house.
Which is kind of more, it kind of shows that, it's, Dina as a character is, from that line alone, from that moment alone, is more fleshed out than she is in the entirety of that game.
I disagree, because you don't even know in this show that Dina is Jewish. There's a lot in the game that some of it is quite optional, but that's the beauty of video games, is that you can have optional stuff in it that flushes these things out.
Yeah, but the show, it seems like they did that more, whereas the Jewish thing doesn't seem to have as much of an impact on the narrative. Or the character.
Does it matter if it has an impact on the narrative or character? It flushes the character out. That's what your problem is that the character's not fleshed out. But then they do flush it out. It's just you didn't pay attention to that part, or you have forgotten that part, or you skipped over that part.
Because the scene doesn't matter in the context of the grander, what the show's doing. Her story, revenge, more sympathizing with Ellie, matters more than a one-off thing that is mentioned at some point and is never mentioned again.
Unless we have
really relevant.
Unless we have our information of the second game wrong, because we're working off of memory and we didn't just play the game. I played it more recently, but I don't remember. And there's a scene in the Jewish church, whatever those are called.
Synagogue.
The synagogue, that they enter the synagogue and Dina gives information about the synagogue and she goes, oh yeah, you know, my family practiced religion. I think she says it didn't really work for her a whole lot, but yeah, you know, this, that, and the third. And she gives family backstory in that scene. Now, it's just talking, but that's what Last of Us is. It's just talking.
But that talking is more memorable when she's talking to Ellie about her family and the show than I think it is the TV series.
I think to you it's more memorable because they stick a camera in Dina's face and make you focus on her, as opposed to you're exploring this area and you're just tuning out what she says.
That's the kind of stuff I don't tune that stuff out. That's what I loved about the first Last of Us that I
saw. Then go play the game again, Connor, because the game does all these things.
Yeah, but it's lacking because once again it's more going back to whole Ellie's depression over Joel's death. That's interfering with that dynamic, with that relationship. The show does not, and it still shows that in those silent moments.
Okay, we got to move on because we're talking about the game and not the show. And I think your critique is based in faulty memory or just you weren't paying attention 5 years ago.
Well,
because all of these scenes also do happen 20 minutes after Joel dies. So I think you were reeling from that and you weren't paying attention to this new character.
Oh, I see. The video game. Well, and to mention it real quickly, I think especially due to the fact that we're making a video game podcast and one that so much hinges on the original game.
Yes, but I'm not willing to get into a debate of what happens in part 2.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I get that.
As opposed to what happened in this season that we are reviewing right now.
So to bring it back to that, I will say that because I did criticize the monologue, how it's kind of unnecessary to just talk to you basically, rather than unveil it as time goes on. But Joel's death scene was very impactful, just like it was in the video game. Going again once back to Mel, in that scene, it shows her she has like the most humanity in that group. Now a lot of them are looking at it and are like shocked by it, but she clearly is more so than anybody else. Her interactions with Joel, putting out Dina.
Is she the one crying in the corner?
Yes, I believe she is.
She was the one. Nora. I just don't remember which.
No, Nora was looking at it. I know that for a fact. Yeah, so yeah, it was her because and that humanizes her more than the game ever does. Again, going from the game, but that thing shows you, and I'll bring it back to the game solely because we now know that Abby's story is going to be told next season, and I'm just super excited to see how they're going to develop that further. Because even in these small parts that she's in, Mel is better than she was in the game. Isaac is better than she was in the game. Owen is better than she was in the game. Nora is just as good as she was in the game. No, Nora is just as good.
Some of these I hard disagree with. Like I agree, Isaac is better, but Isaac has more screen time than he's already had more screen time than he did in the game.
Which is why it's damning.
Which is right. But Isaac's not the important part of the game, right? Like
he's the backbone for the main villain
also
group.
The advantage. I understand. Yes, I understand the context of who he is and why he's important to the context, right? But in a video game, you almost never leave the perspective of the player character. You almost never do. In Last of Us, you straight up don't. If you're not playing that character, you don't see what's happening to them off screen, right? A TV show has to cut away. Like I don't want to say has to, but will often cut away to help pacing, to further understanding, to provide more insight because it's a linear experience as opposed to an interactive one, right?
Yes.
So
which is why I presuppose that this is why the show in narrative is superior to not only the video game, but also why it seems like they'd rather have made a TV show with all of the characters they include and how little screen time they get in the game as comparison to what the show's already done.
I think you're just favoring adaptation here. Like in the sense of they had to do these things because it's television, whereas in a video game, those things don't matter as much because it's a video game. But
it matters in this case because
the simple form of the medium. It can't be damning that you're not getting more Isaac because where we are up to this point in the game, there is zero Isaac. Because you don't leave Ellie's perspective.
And this is once again, and this can add more to the conversation of like what's going to happen next season. But as you could tell from a lot of people who watched it, they hate Abby, and people who have kind of caught on that we're going to see her side of things are upset at that.
This is probably my biggest criticism of the show. Is
really the structure of it.
The structure of it. The structure of
Well, real quick, I will say just to end up my original point. In part 2, you do a lot to like. That's my favorite part of the game. Abby's segment where she's going through and doing her own thing.
Yeah.
Because they humanize her very, very well, especially because of how they kind of unveil why she did what she did.
I think they also don't give you a 2-hour open world sequence that sucks.
Fair enough. But in that scene, it also needed to do more for the characters who were also involved in Joel's death. Because in the same way it humanizes Abby, it doesn't really do that besides Nora. Every other character, Owen's cheating on his wife, and like, why do I like you? Mel, she's just kind of annoying and rude. Or like,
he's
but
cheating on his girl.
When you have his kid, yeah. Manny as well, who I liked in the game. They'll do more with him in the show. I can't help but feel that they will, and that's what feeds into why I don't have any issue with the structure. So I want to hear what your problem with that was, because it seemed like from when you were saying little bits about it, when other people would criticize the change in structure from the video game, you would say they were like complaining unreasonably.
Because okay, those are two different things. The thing that the internet is complaining about is they're either moving things around and people want it to happen beat to beat exactly like the video game. That's a mistake. You don't want to do that in adaptation. You just don't, because you need to be smart about how you adapt things from one medium to another, right? So moving Ellie and Dina's relationship up in the show so it doesn't happen as early, I think was a net positive and worked for the show, right? And it allowed us to flush out relationships in Jackson, because we also spent more time in Jackson to sort of experience all of that. What's another one? Tommy not running ahead of Ellie and Dina. I think it's fine. Tommy's rampage doesn't matter as much as Ellie's rampage, but adds to my point that Ellie doesn't go on a rampage in this season, and I also feel like Ellie isn't dangerous in this season. I felt like she was dangerous in the game. I felt like Ellie was more dangerous than last season. But I could be wrong in that. All of that to say, my problem with the structure is the very literal Ellie segment, Abby segment, the Seattle day 1, day 2, day 3 structure, and then repeat that. That doesn't work for television because, as you've said, Connor, people hate Abby. People don't like Abby, and they're not supposed to like Abby at this point. But the problem with that is now you have shown us that there is an entire season of just Ellie, that you have deconstructed Ellie to a point to where the audience is supposed to not really like Ellie right now, and that does seem like the effect that it's had on the audience is people don't like Ellie right now because she's doing all this fuck shit, right? Which she's supposed to. You're supposed to not like her, this, that, and the third, right? And then it's a hard cut, and then people know, because they're not so stupid, that all of next season is going to be Abby's story. They don't want Abby's story right now because they know they hate Abby, right? So this is going to alienate the TV watchers. They're not going to want to come back for next season, especially if it takes 2 years to produce. I also don't think season 2 is the as a side note, the idea of a show taking a long time to produce and then produce fewer episodes is so that we can keep the quality high. For season 1, I agreed with this. The quality was super, super high. I'm fine with waiting however long it takes to get what we have to get. But we're 2 episodes shorter this season, and I feel like there was a dip in quality. I no longer feel like this show crosses the threshold of it being worth the wait for the amount of content we're getting and for the quality of content we're getting. Still a great show. I would probably overall give this season an 8 out of 10, but that's not enough. And it's a soft 8 out of 10. It's not a hard 8 out of 10. And that's not enough. It needs to be 9, 10 out of 10 for it to be worth waiting this long for this amount of content. Now, that feeds into my complaint about next season. 7 episodes isn't enough. People aren't satiated. They're going to move on and go find something else to satiate themselves, right? In that, if you make us wait 2 years only to then follow a character we don't care about or like, because in 2 years, the audience's feelings are going to settle down. They're not going to hate Abby. They're just going to not like Abby. They're just going to, in their minds, they're going to be like, yeah, I don't like Abby because she killed Joel, and that's going to be the end of the conversation for them. And it's not so much that they're going to be emotionally be involved in the show. They're just not going to care. So when they come back in 2 years and watch season 3, episode 1, they're going to get to the end of the episode and be like, I don't care. I'm done. And so they're just going to dip out. That's the problem with television versus a video game. In my opinion, they needed to do away with the Ellie half, Abby half structure and do what normal television does and layer the storylines on top of each other so that we continue that emotional narrative, that follow through of emotions all the way to the end, right? And so as we are disliking Ellie more, we are liking Abby more at the same time. You know what's a great example of this and how this worked for television? Game of Thrones. Jamie Lannister, you fucking hated. Imagine if you fucking hate Jamie Lannister, you get a whole season, Jamie does one bad thing, disappears for the whole fucking season, and the next season it's just him, and it took 2 years to get to him. You wouldn't watch that season. It doesn't matter if the season is great or not. I'm sure season 3 is going to be great, but it doesn't matter because people won't care. That is the mistake they've made. It's a tactical error. It's not a narrative error.
I think that's something we would have to wait and see on because, yeah, people are angry right now because you did kill off a character who people had fallen in love with the first season. And I do think going back to it where that monologue of just telling why Abby hates it, if this is going to be a problem anyway, without even with the context of why she's doing it, it would have been better to show that naturally in her own story rather than just splurge out in dialogue.
You're the only one I've seen have a problem with that monologue. Everybody loves that monologue.
I have heard other people say otherwise. And again, when you're kind of putting down people's perception of how to watch this because of it being a TV show, that doesn't really hit hard as a criticism.
I'm not putting it on the people. I'm putting it on the creators. Y'all have made a tactical error in how you present this story
and maybe they did
because and listen, the numbers are out. Season 2 has a 30% overall drop off from season 1. The finale had a 55% drop off from season 1. You know, like the numbers are there. People already are not caring as much now.
See, but the issue is that this is more focused on numbers, not the quality of the show on its own merits.
Because the quality of the show doesn't always matter.
It does. Well, I'm of the belief. I can't remember who said it. I think it was maybe Scorsese, maybe Akira Kurosawa. It doesn't matter if the movie made money, only that it was made. You know, I care about this stuff because of art, not because some guy in a boardroom decides, well, it's not making enough money. And who the same exact people, even if there's a show of quality, or even one that makes money potentially, they'll cancel it like those losers at Netflix.
I agree with you, Connor. I'm here for the art too, right? You know, like yes. I don't feel like I have to say that to you. Maybe I do have to say it for the people online. I'm here for the art. I'm on board for season 3, and even they're saying they're going to stretch this out to a season 4. I don't understand how you're going to do that, but you're going to do that. So, okay, go do that.
I have an idea, which I can talk about in a little bit.
I have some formulations of an idea, but again, we're just going to have to see what they do in season 3. How does it make sense from a creative standpoint to say, hey, we're going to lead up to this big climactic moment at the theater where there's a standoff. We're going to hard cut, flashback, and in a video game, you have the rest of the story, so you just keep going. Right? And you see it to the end, right? And even though you don't like Abby and you don't want to play as Abby, you still have gameplay that is fun. So that's going to carry you through at least up until the point to where you start caring about Abby's narrative. But now there's a huge break. Now there's a hard break in seasons. We have to wait 2 years to get this big build up to a theater in which I imagine that's where season 3 ends, is after that fight. How unsatisfying is that? And then so now season 4 is the farm and the Santa Monica fight with that group of raiders or whatever. Like, why would people want to watch that? That's my question. And why after you have to wait 2 years in between each of these seasons? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, you don't have buy-in with the audience with this structure.
And I think that is a very big potential issue, but more so with season 4 as opposed to 3 because people still want to know what happens. And like you said, the episode Watch Off dropped in the final episode, so people didn't even really watch the final episode. Now, could they have just heard about what happens and they'd gone from there? Certainly they could have, or they could have just lost interest in it. It happens to shows all the time.
Connor, my question to you is, if you're HBO and you're funding this show, and this is still a success, but it's less of a success, and they wanted more of a success. So even though it's still a success, it's not enough, right?
Yeah.
Let's see that trend continue in season 3, because season 3's been greenlit. They're going to go make it and produce it. If less people show up for that, doesn't matter if it's good or not. If less people show up for it, why would HBO produce a season 4?
Which I think if they learn from that and accept that as a potential, they could make it to where it doesn't end with just the fight after the theater. It has some points in between it.
Then what is there for a season 4 for story? Then we're just making up a season 4? And
well, that's the thing.
Then also, Connor, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter what they make at that point. People are already tuned off. They've already turned it off.
In the same way they made you hate, you said like people started hating Ellie. In the same way they did that to a character in the first season people liked, what's to stop them from doing it to a character who, everybody can reasonably say had moral justification themselves for why they killed Joel, being Abby. What's to stop them from making her likable in this next season, in the same way they made Ellie more hateable?
They can do that. They're gonna do that.
That's what they
do and how the audience receives it are two different things.
Well, that's why I'm contesting, because, obviously I said at the beginning, I like the narrative more in, the TV show than the video game, which is why I think they'll have a better chance at making you more relatable to Abby. Because people, even after they played the video game, I get it was the way it's structured is that it would go into the next part and you're just playing a video game and usually you want to see it through. But by that same token, someone might want to drop the game because they don't like Abby and
people
wouldn't do that as well as the show. Yeah. So
yes.
It seems like it's going to be a problem anyway.
No, because you're not putting enough weight on the 2 years. People drop out of TV all the time because it takes too long to produce a season, and so they stop caring. Now you are giving them ammunition to stop caring because that's how the story is made, and you're talking to someone who loves the Last of Us Part 2 story. That's how the story is intentionally made, and then you're giving them a 2-year break. They're going to move on. They're not going to care. You already see the numbers going, and it's not. It doesn't matter the quality. I'm expecting the quality to still be high. I'm going to watch this show for as long as they produce it, right? Unless it gets atrociously bad or whatever, but I'm going to watch this show for as long as they produce it. But me and you is not enough. Not for HBO. Well, HBO wants the viewership to go up every season. So if it stops going up, why would they, and it starts going down, why would they continue to produce it? It doesn't matter if it's high quality. Quality isn't always a factor in these decisions.
And again, I get that. But, I mean, if you compared it to Game of Thrones earlier with Jaime Lannister, let's compare that to Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. There has never been a show that had a bigger drop-off and hate surrounding it than the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. House of the Dragon, you would expect that to get no eyeballs on it.
I
didn't see anybody talking about how they were excited for it, but that was a show
The end of Game of Thrones was a cultural event. It was a mass cultural event in how much we don't like this. And guess what? The story stopped after there because they rushed it to the ending, right? That's not equivalent to what's happening here. People are just not caring, and so they're going to drop off. We're not getting to the ending of this show if this pattern continues.
But again, to tie it back to the House of the Dragon, why would anybody care about that show? What reason, after what Game of Thrones did in its last season of everybody hating it? Because no longer do you have that buy-in. And no, it's not yet a cultural movement, and yet, despite that, it's very opening night, and it's consistently done well. Was like one of the most watched shows of that year. I think one of HBO's most watched shows, and people didn't, even though it was years later, even longer than 2 years might have been. People still bought into it. I agree with what you're saying. I get, and
I've got a still might counter to what you just said because you just have to take that thought just a step further, right? Game of Thrones I think Game of Thrones got bad before the last season. I think Game of Thrones last 3 seasons weren't good. It's just season 8 was just so atrociously bad that people point at that one, right? Mm-hmm. So let's meet in the middle and say 6 seasons of Game of Thrones, which they produced faster than they're producing this show. You had a new season of Game of Thrones every year, maybe every year and a half, right? And you had more episodes per season, and it was higher quality, more consistently for those 6 seasons, right? Yeah, sure, the ending was bad. We didn't like the ending. Okay, this, that, and the third. But now you're giving us something new, and we're gonna market it as, hey, this is a return to form. This is a new jumping in point. This is something you can do. It's still Game of Thrones, and so because you have a longer fanship of a show, because they gave you 8 years of content and 6 of them were the best TV you've ever seen in your life, you're gonna go and check this show out. Hey, spoilers, Connor. Season 2 of House of the Dragons didn't do what season 1 did.
Yeah, it didn't. But
are you getting a season 3? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe. I don't follow that show close enough. But I can bet you're probably not getting a season 4.
Maybe not. But then again, the reception to The Last of Us has been, just as a general thing, from my perspective, better than House of the Dragon ended up being. Because I'm talking more about when time is in between something. Even regardless of what taste it left in your mouth, and regardless of what the quality was of the next show, when it first came back, people tuned in. And I think because Last of Us Part 3, Season 3, will be high quality, people will get into it.
They tuned in because it was different. They said
so was
they said
of
the
Us Part
last
3,
one the
too.
last one was great until it
fuck.
stopped being great. This one might go back to being great, right?
And people
If
might
they
think that was
produced a
season
Game
3.
of Thrones season 9, nobody would watch that.
Yeah. Well, that's also the thing I'm talking about where, and Last of Us has an added benefit where even though people had as many issues with the show as they did, with the video game as they did, they came back. It sold like hotcakes. It sold amazingly well. And if they made another Last of Us, it would sell amazingly well. Not only do you have that buy-in for people who play video games and want to watch the newest video game adaptation, and also including the people who would hate watch it, you also have the general HBO audience that are going to tune in and watch the new big HBO show, and anybody else who's usually not an HBO fan that might want to jump into it and enjoy it. I think if they hit hard enough with season 3, these things, your issue with the structure won't matter. I still open the gates to it might. Who knows? But you can't gauge audience reactions entirely.
You're right. If they hit it so hard out of the park that like fan word says, "Oh no, it's great. You need to go back and keep going," then yeah, sure, there's still a chance. My money is on it doesn't matter how hard they hit it out of the park. I imagine they're going to hit it out of the park really fucking hard. My perspective on where we are right now in 2025 at the end of season 2 with a 55% drop off in audience retention is it doesn't matter how hard they're going to hit it. The numbers are going to be lower. And when the numbers are lower, why would HBO renew for season 4?
Well, Tavin, you know what I'm going to say. Can you guess it?
No.
I think you know. We'll wait and see.
We'll
see what happens.
We'll wait and see on that. So, Connor, let's move into, obviously we know season 3 is going to be Abby's story. I imagine there's going to be some changes. Just generally, there kind of has to be. But I do. There already were. I do feel like Abby's story is in Last of Us Part 2. I agree, that's the best part of the game, but it's also supposed to be because it's not as melancholy and dour. And you can always appreciate someone coming back from darkness as opposed to diving into darkness more. Generally people like that more.
I don't really.
Well, I mean, it depends.
Well, actually,
right?
I think
like, you don't want to watch
Zero
Joker all the time, right? Like, you're good for like one time and you go, wow, that was great. And then you're never going to watch it again. Or you might watch it again, but you're probably not going to watch it. Like, it's not going to become like a guilty pleasure movie. You're not going to watch it more than 10 times in your life.
That might be because it's maybe overrated in the grand scheme of things.
You're picking apart my example.
Why wouldn't
tone is what I'm talking about. I think like it's so funny to me that you're like, oh, Owen's done better here. Like, we don't fucking know Owen. Like,
the bit we've seen.
In terms of Owen, there's literally no difference from what we've seen here and what we've seen in the game up to this point.
I mainly think, and this is once again, you know what? I'll bring in part 2 again.
Because guess what? Guess what? Owen's still in love with Abby, and he's still gonna fuck Abby on the boat.
Yeah, oh yeah, but no, my issue is
maybe not on the boat, but he's still gonna fuck Abby and cheat on Mel.
Definitely going to happen. And even without that part, in part 2, when you go into that conversation as Ellie, they're like in a pretty bad, like he's basically ditching her. Which is, you clearly tell it from the conversation Ellie is hearing. Whereas in this one, it comes across more as like, oh, I'm frustrated. I got to go get Abby. I'm not going to just let her out there to die and be on her own. No, it doesn't feel like he's abandoning her. But it doesn't read like so clearly like that, where he's like, leave without me. I don't care about you. I'm going with Abby. It's like, get on the boat and,
that's not what he does in the game. And that's like these two scenes are pretty equivalent, is where they're literally arguing over it. Him going, I'm going to go save Abby because I care about her, and Mel going, fucking why? Why do you care about her? She's a piece of shit. Like, it's the same thing.
Well, you know what? I won't die on the hill with Owen.
I think you're judging the game really harshly based off of this memory that you have of it, and not this show, despite its like minor changes, is kind of one for the game. What you get here is what you get in the game.
It's just more of it. Like, for example, Jesse. I didn't talk about him because I very much
more
like
in the game.
You definitely don't. You don't get his motivations as much. At least I can't remember him as well.
Oh, they do flesh out Jesse more here.
Yeah.
That's an example of where they fleshed him out, yeah.
Yeah, and just, he was already a character I thought he was going to be a nothing character in the game. I started liking him. They gave me not enough for me to care as much when he died. In this one, especially with knowing what was going to happen when they were running up to, save Tommy. I was like, oh shit, this is going to suck. And it hurt. It hit when he died, far more than it did in the context of the video game. And
I like Game Jesse more.
You like Game Jesse more?
Yeah, I still like this Jesse, but I just like Game Jesse more. I think this Jesse's kind of a dick, like at times. Rightfully so. He's always justified in his being of a dick. But like there was a snarky, like a sarcastic, like smartassness to Jesse in the game, and you don't really get that here. There's like glimpses of it, but it's not to the level that you get in the game, in my opinion.
Sure, I more was a fan of the fact that he's a person who's very much caught up in the community of Jackson and trying to do right by its people.
Again, I loved all of the flushing out of Jackson. Honestly, I wish this show took more time. I wish this was 9 episodes and it was still, if we're still doing the structure, I just wish we had just 2 more episodes and just more time flushing things out. Like, because we took our time in the first 2 episodes. Like, we slowly took our time. And it feels like as soon as we got to Seattle, we just hitting beats fast.
Which, to that point, as far as structure is concerned, that probably would have benefited. Not necessarily because of the whole you cut off to go to Abby's part, but it could have spent more time in Jackson and spent more time in Seattle than it did. Because, like the Sarah fights, for example, we're of course going to see a lot more of them in Abby's season. Yeah, so much more of them. But they could have slowed it down and ended it like the time where Mel and Owen get killed. That could have been a good heavy-hitting part to end off on.
And it's funny because my dad is watching this show, and he's still on board. He still likes it. He's still really enjoying it. But the breadcrumbs and the mysteries that they're laying in Ellie's story that don't get answered until Abby's story in the game, like the Sarah fights, like Isaac, what's going on with that's where he's getting frustrated. Because he goes, you've laid out all these breadcrumbs, and you're giving me nothing for them. I'm interested to know what's up with these Sarah fights. I'm interested to know what's up with Isaac. But by the end of the show, I don't know what you're doing with them. Like, and that's where he's unsatisfied. So I think that's an interesting perspective of somebody who who doesn't have the information is frustrated at different parts than we are.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the end of the game. End of the day, a video game podcast. We played the video games.
Yeah.
Even if it's been, in my case, some time separating from it. So it's kind of hard to separate those two things.
The first time viewer, their perspective is still valid in this. Like if they're saying, hey, I'm frustrated at these parts, and we're saying, hey, we're frustrated at these parts. Is anybody happy? Like, let me rephrase that because I'm happy. But like I'm just looking grander scope, and I'm looking outside of my own perspective, and I go, I just don't know if this audience has buy-in. But that again, we've beat that point to death. Oh, I had a thought and it's gone.
Damn, that happens.
It happens.
You know, when you were going through it earlier, I remember I had some thoughts as well, and I've been trying to remember them.
That's why I've been trying to have the notebook, and I left the notebook in the kitchen table. So that I can.
You know what? For these longer form reviews, that's a good idea just to do in the future.
Dude, the notebook's great. I love being able when we reviewed Breath of the Wild. I love being able to like jot a note and come back to it. That was fantastic.
Standard now.
Yeah, because it's like to have a thought, but I have to let you speak.
Yeah, because we're not doing the conversation where we can be fine with interrupting each other. You want people's thoughts to play out when you're in a podcast setting.
100%. Yeah,
and that could, in the same way, I get points and I have to let it fly. If I was to be interrupted during a point and we go on to something else, I would lose the steam from my original point that I was making. And I'll be like, oh, I can't remember what I was going on. I can't remember the flow of my argument. And now I'm here stuck up, with a I'll stop with the analogy here.
Anyways,
yeah.
So, and I imagine we're going to get a lot more Isaac back to what we expect for next season. I imagine we're getting a lot more Isaac next season.
Yes. Which I'm happy for.
I am too. What's his name?
Dude, he's so good. He was Detective Gordon in the new Batman films.
In the Robert Pattinson, Matt Reeves Batman. Yeah. He was great there. He's great here. He did play Isaac in the game, but again, you had 12 minutes of you had 10 minutes of screen time of Isaac in the game, and it's a 20-hour video game. Yep. So he's already got more screen time now. Jeffrey Wright, and he's killing it. He's doing a great job. Again, I think these performances are phenomenal. I just think there are moments where the material lets them down. One funny thing, episode 6 is my favorite episode of the season. It might be my favorite episode of the series.
Boring.
it's the flashback episode where we're
boring.
getting through the structure of all of. Are you serious? Or are you fucking around?
No, I'm joking.
Okay, yeah. We're getting
slower,
we're getting through all of Ellie's birthdays and stuff. So I liked being able to see that. I needed that episode a few episodes sooner, because I didn't have a clear jump in time from Ellie season 1 to Ellie season 2. It still felt like a young Ellie to me until we got to that episode. That episode did wonders for me as a TV watcher, not as a video game player, but as a TV watcher, in aging her up. Which is weird. So I guess I needed that sooner or something. But now that I have it, I don't know. It's weird. Like, art is weird in this way, right? But anyways, the museum moment I like better in the game because it's a video game, so you can really take your time, explore, savor these few moments with Joel that you have. But the extra add-ons of everything else that happens, I think are great. I like how Ellie figures out that Joel is lying in the show better than in the game. I mean, she always knew he was lying, but in the game, her curiosity just finally overcomes her, and she just runs to Salt Lake City and finds out for herself, right? I like here, Joel gets tested again, and she identifies the pattern and goes, "You're full of shit, you're lying to me."
A quick movie recommendation: watch the Korean film Burning. Does that amazingly well. But yeah, it was so impactful because, it's just that look he gave, and she, especially knowing it, was like, "Oh, you're lying."
Yep.
And I'm not going to deal with it anymore. So that moment where she calls him out was really heavy hitting, especially because Joel clearly was like taken aback by it, kind of like the first moment she went from being his kid, so to speak, to her own person.
And I mean, there was a bunch of other scenes in that episode that I loved as well. The him catching her and Kat together, and now she's. I love the thing where he's like, all of the teenager things all at once, huh? Fucking smoking pot, experimenting with girls, tattoos, and she goes, "I'm not experimenting. Like, this is who I am." But this is a 2003 Joel, and so he doesn't, the conversation of homosexuality and equality isn't where it is in 2020, whatever, when the game takes place.
And what I like is it never does the moment where he's like, "I'm sorry, Ellie, I was wrong. I accept your feelings of being gay." It was none of that. He clearly accepted it. And, with how he defended Dina, especially in that same exact episode, Dina and Ellie, seeing it in that episode again reaffirmed that for people that might not have caught along to it in the first place. But again, this ties back to that amazing.
He's not into the idea. Like, he doesn't like it, but he's like, "I love you and I want you to be happy, so whatever."
And going back, saying that, I love the scene. I need to look up the actor again in the beginning of that episode where it establishes, kind of his mindset with parenting, with the conversation he has with his dad. That was incredibly effective. He does amazing as Lalo in Better Call Saul. So I'll look it up right now. But
it's one of those things that, like, if you were to pitch, "Hey, we're going to do a flashback segment where we see a young Joel and his father," I would kind of cringe at that. And when it was happening, I was cringing at it in real time. And even when we got to the end of it, it was a good scene, so I liked it, but I was like, I don't know if I needed that. But when it came all the way back around to the porch, I was like, the way you set up and paid off this line was masterclass. That was fantastic.
Tony Dalton, amazing actor. But yeah, and you mentioned the porch scene. I love, especially with, once again, knowing my knowledge of the video game, because from my knowledge, after the interaction at the New Year's party, they have their conversation and you see it. Am I right about that? Or do they do what they exactly did in the show where she leaves? And you don't think they have that heart-to-heart? In the
game, she doesn't do the walking away thing in the game.
I didn't think she did.
I think she goes straight to the porch. I mean, like, time has passed. It's later in the evening, right?
Yeah, right.
And in the show, that's kind of a combination of two different scenes. It's the combination of the scene where she confronts him in Salt Lake City. So him admitting what he did to her is kind of brought forward into that porch scene, which I think is a good choice. I really liked how that scene played out. It felt natural. I think it really, really showed how strong these two actors are. I think Pedro Pascal, holy shit, dude. The way he can convey what he's thinking and what he feels without saying anything is masterclass. Bella Ramsey, I think, is elevated by Pedro in that scene because it's her best acting in that scene as well. And yeah, I thought it was fantastic. It's one of those scenes that I don't think is better or worse than the game. I think it's about equivalent.
I just like how they did it in the sense of you didn't think they would get that closure when she walked past the porch in the first episode, and then to double back around and be like, oh, okay, they're gonna have that. It does add on to the tragedy, but that's path to reconciliation is open.
That's the stuff that like they're manipulating us game players with information. So like Ellie walks past the porch, and then for the whole season you're thinking, oh God, we're not getting the porch scene. That's fucking nuts, Like I kind of suspected that we were gonna double back and she was gonna do that because that's also this Ellie is to walk past and then come back and go, you know what, fuck you, like type thing. But I'm glad that was the choice that they made. I love that choice. I think it's I think it works for this show. I think it works for this character. And like again, I just still think that this show is really, really good, really good. Despite I don't understand how the internet can say this is bad. Like I don't get that. Even though I do think there was a drop in quality here, I don't think it's like so severe that I would like turn around and be like, ugh,
Well, when you do something as bold as doing what they did at the beginning, same way they did in the game, you're going to lose people. That's just going to happen, and you're going to lose the investment some people had, especially maybe those people that were logging on to see Pedro Pascal and were like, wait, he's not going to be in the show anymore? Because there is definitely a big subsection of people that tune into a show solely because an actor's in it. And Pedro Pascal since he's as good as he is in general, I can see them people who didn't have the knowledge of the game coming in and still being just as dissatisfied as somebody who played the video game was going into part 2.
That was something my dad brought up as well, is the celebrity of Pedro Pascal, this being his show, or at least it was. My dad did wonder, are people going to drop off because Pedro's gone? And just generally people don't care about all these other actors as much as they care about Pedro Pascal. He's hot right now. He's the most poppin' thing. He's about to be Reed Richards in Fantastic Four and so forth, which how good for him for the stars to align that like he gets this great show opportunity and it times out in a way to where he dies just in time for him to go film a big Marvel movie. Good for him.
He's going to need the time.
All right. So I'm happy with this show. I'm still on board for a season 3. I think at where we're at right now, which is still early. I mean, we're not even halfway through the game. We're like 40-ish% through the game right now. Right now, I think the game is doing a better job in telling the story than the show is doing, but the show is still doing a good job. And I'm excited for season 3. I'm hoping and I'm betting on that they're going to knock it out of the park. I think Caitlin Denver.
Abby?
Deaver. What's her name?
Who? I don't know. Who's this?
I think I'm throwing it in there. Yeah, it's Abby.
Okay.
I think the little bits we get from her are phenomenal as well. So I am excited to see what she brings to the role of Abby.
Caitlin Dever. Yeah, you were right. It's just pronunciation.
Yeah, I personally, I got a problem that she's not got muscle on her. Like she doesn't need to be a fucking bodybuilder like she is in the game. But I need to at least look at her and be like, oh, you lift weights at least, And she's just not. But they've chosen not to go that route, and I don't think that's a smart choice because Abby getting ripped over the course of the 4 years from when her dad dies to when she kills Joel says something about her character, and I don't.
5 loser.
Is it 5?
Yeah, because it's 2 years. It skips 1 year again, then 2 years, and then 9 months after the event.
Do you go and watch some fucking? Oh, you're talking from the birthday episode.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because she goes from 14 to 19. Duh. Okay. Yeah.
Well, not yeah.
So yeah, well, I'm excited to see what she brings to the role. I'm excited to see her story play out. Lev and Yara are some of my favorite characters in The Last of Us, so I'm excited to see them finally and for people to see them. Those are the little 2 Asian kids who leave the Seraphites.
Yeah.
They're my favorite new characters in part 2. The exception of maybe Dina. I do really like Dina. And I'm just interested to see where we leave off. Do you think we're leaving off after the fight at the theater? Is that where we end season 3? I think that's where we end season 3.
I think we are, but your criticism of that was reasonable. So maybe it'd be, they're of course writing the show. Maybe to not do that.
I don't think they're going to listen to guys like me.
Probably not.
Because
But
I wouldn't have done this structure at all.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. But you're speaking in this case from the structure of still getting money from HBO, which they're more minded in thinking about that sort of thing. I think than a watcher like me and even you would ideally,
If it's me, season 2 is 2 episodes longer. We mix and match the storylines like I've been talking about, and we end with Ellie beating Nora to death and Abby surviving the Rat King.
Oh yeah, the Rat, yeah, that's gonna come in, and also maybe showing a bit of Tommy and Jesse. Having a bit more of them, specifically Tommy, because people do like him, and we don't really see a lot. And they kind of seem like they want to do more with him, with the whole attack on Jackson that doesn't happen in the video game. The huge swarm of enemies, and seeing him like lead the big bloater away and lead the resistance against.
I think
the
that's
wave,
I think because they knew we're not doing the Tommy running ahead of them bit. Where that's the trade-off that they're giving us, so they're saying, hey, we're taking this away, but we're gonna give you this. Yeah,
I see.
And personally I like that more, because for the purposes of television, I think Tommy, because Tommy's rampage and you following the steps of his rampage ahead of you is not so much to talk about character. Now, the writing's so good that it does tell you something about character, but that's to tutorialize the player on the world. So, that's to tutorialize and remind the player of how torturing works, and, you point to a map and your buddy better point to the same place, type thing. TV watchers are better about retaining those details, so they'll remember things like that. I think game players, and also because video games take longer to make, those details might slip, So we're heavy in the weeds. We've been talking for an hour and 16 minutes. Connor, is there anything else you want to shout out about this season, or what could possibly happen?
I think we've talked a lot, but I'm interested to see what they got with season 3. I didn't know I would like it as much as I did, but I did.
I'm shocked you liked it as much as you did, because I thought you were gonna be like I thought you were gonna be like me and be like, yeah, the writing's not as good. I did think there was a potential for you to like it more than the game, but for you to like it more than season 1 is nuts.
Yeah. I just, again, a lot of this was from me remembering season 1 and also having a lot of stuff that I just don't remember. Whereas I feel like I retain a lot of what happens in this show more. I was more invested than I was the first season.
Is it weird that I find video games easier to retain information from than TV shows?
No, you like video games more. I do TV shows as the general thing less. It helps that it's connected to video games, which I, do remember as well.
We'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, let us know down in the comments below, what did you think of The Last of Us Season 2 HBO? Let us know where you think they're going in Season 3. Let us know if you're going to watch Season 3. And, I guess ring off if you're really upset about all these small little tiny changes that they made. Until next time, have a great time. And Connor, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye.